Hi, this is Rachel Gage, and I'm doing the case study second portion for SPCE 683. So just a kind of refresher on the client that I chose for this project. He is 5 years old, 7 months, level 3 autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. He's also nonverbal. He uses an AAC device mainly to communicate. But he does have some verbal communications of different words, some of which can be up to 2 or 3 mans, depending on the difficulty in pronunciation. He also receives speech and has graduated from occupational therapy. So here are some of the behavioral targets for him. I just actually participated in a 6-month reassessment with him using the VB-MAPP, which we talked about in the first case study. And so this was an awesome, perfect timing to talk about for this portion. So the first one is manning to others for actions needed to enjoy an activity. So essentially, all that this skill is manding, but specifically to peers. So we noticed a lot of different language and social deficits. So this is going to help with the social portion as well as the communication, which is listed in his treatment plan. But just manding to others to enjoy whatever activity. So push me on the swing, chase me, things like that, that will also aid in his play skills. So tacting different actions. So this just falls under tacting. This would look like we could use visual aids of showing different pictures. Show me the boy running, show me the girl drinking, etc. And this is going to help with discrimination as well. Social imaginary play, that one kind of ties into the first one. We noticed in his reassessment that he does not have very exploratory or social imaginary play skills. So we really wanted to work on that this time around, although he has developed several other skills over the last 6 months. So identifying emotions of others. Can he look at a peer who is crying, screaming, and say, oh, I think she's feeling upset? Can he look at a picture of someone smiling with a thumbs up and say, oh, they're happy? And that is the one that we're going to be talking about today specifically. And then two other behavior targets are aggression and tantrum behavior. So tantrum behavior looks like, for this client, when he's engaging in 2 or more of the following for 20 seconds or more. That could include screaming, crying, falling to the floor, engaging in some spurts of aggression, SIB, and just general noncompliance. And then aggression would look like, for this client, kicking or striking others with a closed or open fist 6 inches away or more. That would cause a sound to be heard from 1 to 2 feet away. So those are kind of the definitions of these different behavioral targets, and it kind of gives you a better idea of where this client is at in terms of skill level. So now let's talk about what we've chosen for this. For the behavioral target is identifying emotions of others. So the intervention for identifying emotions of others, the intervention that's being utilized for this program is DTT through visuals, as well as a focus on NET. While we want the teaching procedure to be mainly naturalistic, obviously that would be our main goal. It might also be beneficial in the initial teaching of the skill to use discrete trial training. So on average, what this intervention is going to look like is when it could be a peer or an adult is showing an emotion in the naturalistic environment, the therapist will give the SD to this client of how are they feeling, she, he, depending on, he can differentiate the pronouns, so they don't necessarily have to say they could say how is she feeling, how is he feeling. And the client will respond either verbally or with his AAC device. And what will be used if there is a incorrect response or initially to teach it will be errorless teaching during that teaching phase, as you can see I've listed here. And then once the skill is learned, then error correction and using most to least prompting. Most of this is going to be on his AAC device, so hand over hand showing him where the icon of sad is if his peer is crying, and they give the SD of how is she feeling. And then we will fade that out from the hand over hand to maybe at the wrist, to the elbow, to a gesture, etc. So continue to kind of just give a brief overview of this intervention and breaking down the different strategies and techniques. So antecedent strategy that we're using for this is in the DTT setting, we would use visual aid cards. And then we would also, both in the DTT and NET setting, use high probability request sequence. So I know that this client is more likely to correctly identify the emotion of sad. He's most likely going to get that one correct. So we're going to start with, if we notice in the natural environment, for example, a peer is crying or upset about various things, we're going to ask him, oh, how do you think they're feeling? We know he's probably going to get sad correct. Then maybe we can model ourselves and kind of contrive the situation of how am I feeling, and do maybe bored. That's a harder emotion to identify. Or medium, we could do a happy or excited, and then move into the more difficult emotions for him to identify. Behavioral techniques that we're using, which we just discussed, was DTT and NET, and then our consequence strategies, which we also hit on a little bit. Errorless teaching, mainly in the teaching portion of the skill, and then error correction using the most to least prompting. And then one of the most important parts of this is positive reinforcement of the correct responses. So whatever that might look like, depending on his motivation for certain reinforcements, we're going to use that dependent on that motivation for reinforcement for the correct response of identifying emotions of others. So right now, that would probably look like Play-Doh, playing with Play-Doh or clay. He also enjoys watching certain videos. So those are some of the reinforcements that we might use to as a consequence strategy for the correct responses. So intervention questions. Is this functional? Is this functionally relevant? And is it evidence-based? So I do believe that it's functionally relevant, both DTT and NET, specifically DTT because it's been proven through research to aid in the teaching of those new skills, especially to individuals with autism. And DTT specifically aids in the discrimination skills, which is the whole basis of what this client is going to need to be able to identify different emotions. So he's going to need to be able to discriminate, and at a higher level than just show me the color red in an array of 3 colors or so. And then for NET, NET specifically will aid in the generalization of the skill. So over time, we're probably going to want to move more towards only running this in a naturalistic setting, but for the very beginning, I think it's important for us to also include DTT, because that's really going to aid in teaching that skill and teaching it pretty quickly so that we can move to the naturalistic environment and just simply use that because that's what he's going to do in real life. He's going to be in a naturalistic setting and see various emotions expressed from other people, and that's where we want to focus, or that's what we want to focus on, less on if I show you a picture of how someone's feeling, can you identify it? That might be super beneficial for, reading books, telling stories, watching movies, but more so it's going to be spent in the natural environment and different interactions that he has with people throughout his life. And is this evidence-based? This intervention, I believe, is evidence-based. Both discrete trial training and naturalistic environment teaching are both very backed with research, and they align with the established principles of behavior analysis to a T. So one of the last things for us is the BACB task list. So G4 talks about using stimulus and response prompts and fading. That's exactly what we're doing. We're using errorless at first, then we're using error correction, most to least prompting. And then I explained also how we're going to fade that prompt over time. G9, use discrete trial, free operant, and naturalistic teaching arrangements. So both of those, the first discrete trial training and the last naturalistic teaching, obviously are the 2 interventions that we're using. And then the last is G13, using high probability instructional sequence. So you can see how all of these are clearly identified and used within the intervention of this target behavior. That high probability instructional, starting with the SAD, then moving to, maybe excited, then a harder one, bored, and identifying that. So we've used all of these within the task list, and there are several things within the ethics code that we are following as well that go under different behavior change procedures that are listed within that. So in conclusion, I feel like the intervention chosen for this target behavior is super clear, concise, and it aligns really well with the principles of behavior analysis. So as we know, and as it was talked about in this week's video, we have to make changes all the time. We have to have those modifications as we learn and grow. People change, kids grow quickly, but this is a great start to identifying emotions of others and teaching this skill. All right. Thank you so much for watching.